in the way it's described.
My Lords, I thought long and hard about how to approach this, because I want to support the autonomy of students to organise separately without interference, not just academic autonomy that we've talked about, but you would like that. And I also appreciate the points that have just been made about a collegiate atmosphere and not looking as though the students are excluded from that. You want them to be involved in it. But anyway, I think on reflection, however, student unions do need to be subject to this obligation to secure free speech. But I do appreciate what's just been said about the difficulties. So I've got no solutions, but I wanted to raise some of the things. One of the issues is student unions have become the power brokers of free speech in the new free speech wars on campus. That is the reality of the situation. They can often withhold affiliation for student societies on the grounds that they disapprove of their views. And it does make them a very powerful body in this whole discussion. One story that really shocked me was when a Labour councillor who was a porter at Clare College, Kevin Price, he resigned from Cambridge City Council when he felt his conscience couldn't allow him to vote for a Liberal Democrat motion that began trans women are women, trans men are men. I'm not making that point, this is just the truth, this is the facts of the matter. So he resigned as a councillor, on conscience, Labour councillor. Student activists at Clare College, when they learned about these actions, with the support of the Union of Clare students, and I confess that I don't know Oxbridge, so I know that these aren't necessarily student unions. I get confused, is the point I'm making, because I went to Warwick. But anyway, they had a campaign in the union with the activists demanding that this man resign as a porter. And this is what they said. They described him as unfit to hold public office and to be in a position of responsibilities over students. They called him a bigot and a potential risk to trans students. And this campaign went on for some time. Now, nothing happened in the end, although, needless to say, it was very unpleasant for him. But these were student activists demanding that a member of staff be sacked, and not even an academic staff. And I just think there's something about that story that we can recognise. But just the only other story is that a group of students at Sheffield University tried to set up a free speech society in February 2020. And when they applied to the student union, their application to set up a free speech society was declined. This is not the only one, by the way, because this actually happened at LSE. Eventually they got there, but this has happened and Leeds University as well, actually. The group from Sheffield appealed to the student union, and they did win. They kind of got some outside backup. But they were told that the student union that had identified that the Free Speech Society was on a red risk list. And that meant that officers would have to attend risk assessment training, and that they couldn't invite any speakers onto campus without first having to submit a list of prospective speakers to the student union 3 weeks ahead of time for a full and final approval. This story is one of many stories that if you go through, any of the people who've done work on this will tell you, and I've been involved in a lot of them, that students have contacted me either through the Free Speech Union or through any number of different activist groups, where despite what the noble Lord Treisman said about how will all these societies cope, I can assure you they're having to cope with a lot of bureaucratic nonsense, as it happens, if they want to invite anyone onto campus to speak, and it's the student unions demanding it. So just the final thing was, I went and spoke at a student event. There was 250 people. I was giving a lecture on free speech. By the time I arrived at the event, the students who had invited me, who were kids, remember these are 19-year-old kids, who'd set up a free speech society. By the time I got there, they looked sort of ashen, and if they'd gone through a terrible experience, which they had because they'd had so much trouble about inviting me, but I didn't know this at this point, right? But they looked in trauma. When the event was going on, there was 3 people sitting in the front row who were sitting with kind of crossed arms and writing notes. And I thought they didn't look friendly. I asked who they were afterwards, and I was told they were the student union officers who'd come in to check what I was talking about and to make sure that I didn't breach any rules, and which was disconcerting. We then went to the bar, and same 3 people sat at the next table to us. And I said, "Do you want to join us?" And they said no. And then they sat at their table in silence. And it was a little bit like the Stasi keeping their eye out, right? And the students who had invited me said, that's what they do. It's an intimidation tactic. And it really was intimidating, by the way. Oh, I'm old hand, and I found it intimidating. But if you're 19, the outcome of this event was that they were requested. I didn't get them into too much trouble, but it was requested that it was too near the mark and they had to go on training courses and all the rest of it. The outcome of this, and this is the significant bit, is that the 3 people who'd set up the Free Speech Society at that university said that they were going to drop out of politics. They couldn't cope, right? This is a student union. They didn't want the hassle. That they really enjoyed my speech, but it was like an ordeal. Now, as it happens, you will be unsurprised to know that this has happened to a lot of students who've invited me to speak, to such is the extent that I now warn them off inviting me to speak and say, look, you don't want the hassle, to be frank. It'll cause you a lot of hassle. So I don't get cancelled before I arrive because I actually know that it's probably not worth putting the kids through it. The main reason I'm telling you all that is it's the student unions who are implementing all this. And it's, in that sense, my collegiate feelings to student unions have evaporated somewhat. But my collegiate feelings to those students who want to be politically active have extended. And I'm hoping that this bill, by incorporating student unions, putting free speech at the forefront, might actually be helped to actually be free to organise societies as they wish.